Fish and Wildlife. Good job and welcome.
All right, thank you guys. It's great to see so many people excited about native plants, hopefully excited about using those native plants to attract wildlife to their wild spaces. As she mentioned, my name is Jena Donnel. I'm a communication specialist with the Wildlife Department. We are primarily funded by the sale of hunting and fishing licenses, as well as the excise taxes collect on certain sporting goods, primarily used for hunting and fishing. Because of that, much of our agency is focused on game management, so things that can be hunted or fished. I am more associated with our wildlife diversity program. That's kind of the non-game arm of the agency. So we're thinking a lot more about things, rare, declining, threatened, and endangered species, as well as common species that aren't hunted or fished. So I'm really thankful to be here with you guys today to talk about landscaping for wildlife, or as we like to call it, wildscapes. I heard it echoed through this morning's presentations. I'm sure that will continue through the afternoon. Really and truly, we're going to be talking about habitat. Is there a place for the wildlife that we hope to attract? Is there something for them to eat? Is there someplace for them to rest? Hopefully someplace to raise their young, and then maybe even find protection. So that could be from predators, but that could also be from the elements. So we have some pretty harsh summers in Oklahoma. Occasionally we'll get a pretty harsh winter. So wanting to find protection in a couple different ways. The more habitat elements that we can include in our wildscape, the better chances we'll have of wildlife actually visiting, and not just visiting, but maybe living. So let's go ahead and think about wildscaping. Whenever we are planning, you guys know this, there's a lot of work involved. So there can be quite a bit of work involved on the planning side, but also in the implementation side. Really and truly with our wildscapes, there's kind of three limitations. So there's your imagination. You know, you can do as much as you want. There's your budget. You can put as much money as you want into it. And then there's reality. And so that's where we're going to kind of focus, especially on the first two wildscaping steps. Let's see. Can you, nope. It advanced. Okay, so we're going to try to figure out what species we want to attract to our property, and then figure out the kind of the habitat needs of those species. So using myself as an example, I live in central Oklahoma on a relatively small piece of property, about 2 acres in size. I like to think of it as rural adjacent. I've got neighbors on 3 sides, but I do have like a hayfield, catty corner. There's a pasture on one side with a small stream about a 1/4 mile away. Another 1/4 mile away in the opposite direction is a relatively busy highway. I have a lot of wildscape opportunities in front of me. Almost any size property, you can have at least some opportunity in front of you. That being said, no matter how much my imagination is, no matter how much money I throw at this piece of property, if I stay within those bounds, I can't expect to have every species that can be found in central Oklahoma. So we really kind of need to keep that 1 foot grounded in reality for that. So let's go ahead and go through 4 kind of major categories of species that we might be able to attract to our wildscapes. First up are going to be our mammals. We have about 108 species of mammals that are native and documented in the state. Some of these are going to be a little bit more used to people. Those are probably the ones that we're going to get into our wildscapes. Some are really pretty secretive. They might be on our properties and we just don't know it. Some of them are going to be pretty widespread, like our eastern red bat. We heard about that earlier this morning. That's a species that can be found in all 77 counties. If kind of going back to that reality, if we are really excited about Ozark big-eared bats and we live out west, we're probably not going to get that species. Some of our species are larger. So this is a group that has probably the larger size animals in it. And we just kind of need to recognize a larger animal probably needs a little bit larger space. So that's going to be our first habitat consideration for these species. If we have a small postage stamp yard, we might have some great wildscape opportunities, but we may not get a red fox to do more than just run across the yard. So we kind of have to recognize, space is probably going to be the biggest consideration with our mammal group. For each of our categories, we're definitely going to need food. But with our mammals, it could get a little bit more complicated, right? So we've got omnivores, carnivores, and herbivores. So with our carnivores, if we've got a red fox, if that's our target species there, we're going to have some small mammals. So we're going to have to, if we want those small mammals, we've got to figure out, I need a good seed base to feed those mammals. So the bigger the food chain or the food web is, the more complicated and more things that we've got to really be thinking about in terms of mammals. So food is definitely going to be a big consideration here. And then for mammals and some other stuff, cover for sure. So denning spaces are going to be pretty important for some of these species as well. So whether or not we've got a big rock pile out there that they can kind of find a denning spot there. For a raccoon, say, if we've got a large dead standing tree, a limb has fallen off and created a cavity there, that might be beneficial. All right, so let's move on for our pollinators.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, please.
How many skunks? Is that one family?
That was a little, so she asked how many skunks there were. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 kits, it looks like. So 6 tiny little kits, yes. I'm not for sure their fecundity, but I think 4 to 8 would probably be a standard size there. Yeah, I love skunks. All right, so if we move on to pollinators, this is a much larger category in terms of diversity and number of species. So again, a lot of people are thinking about butterflies, but we've got bees, ants. For pollinators, you can even throw in hummingbirds. We hit on it in a couple other presentations, especially the last one. Food is going to be probably our biggest consideration here. We've got other people later on today talking about pollinators. So want to just kind of hit the highlights here. Food, so bright, sunny, beautiful blooms that's providing a nectar source. He also mentioned a lot about our host plants. So some of our species might be a little bit more finicky and want certain species. Others might be a little bit more of a generalist. And then we also want to think about overwintering habitat for the larvae and for the adults as well, if they go into a second year. So do you have a good leaf litter or a good detritus base down at the ground level? Then moving on to our reptiles and amphibians, some people are more comfortable with having snakes and lizards and frogs and toads at their house than others. That's okay, we love that, but it's not a requisite to having a wildscape. If you're uncomfortable with that, that's okay. Nobody's going to think differently about you. So we have about 140 species or so of reptiles and amphibians. About 55 of those are amphibians, so salamanders, frogs, and toads. The rest are going to be lizards, snakes, turtles, and then we have 1 species of alligator in this state. When I am thinking about reptiles and amphibians and wildscapes and having them in my yard, I need to have some food. We talked about that. Most of our reptiles and amphibians are going to be eating a lot of insects. Some of them might also be eating some small mammal community, so we might have to kind of keep those around. And then some of them are also eating other reptiles and amphibians. So it just kind of circles in there. The other really big consideration that we need to be thinking about for reptiles and amphibians is cover. So I was at Sandy Sanders Wildlife Management Area this week, and we were looking under a lot of rocks. We were looking under a lot of, if there was some tree branches that had fallen over. So cover is really important for a lot of these species. Not only to find maybe some insects that are associated with that cover, but also kind of escaping the elements. So reptiles and amphibians are ectotherms. They are really relying on outside sources to warm up and cool down. So having a big rock pile, you might be able to get some eastern collared lizards that are really kind of basking and soaking up the sun rays. And then conversely, they're going to be able to escape the heat and cool down under some of those fallen logs and those sorts of things. One fun thing that it's probably trended a while ago. I'm just not up to speed on a lot of this, but I have heard a lot about, for our frogs, there's something called a frog hotel that a lot of people have been putting up in their wildscapes or even in their neighborhoods. It's very simple though. It is a PVC pipe that's cut down. It's got a cap on the bottom. They drill a hole about 5 inches up so that when rainwater comes in, there's a little bit of water down in the bottom, but it doesn't overflow. And then the tree frogs just kind of hang out there during the day. So it's dark and damp for these tree frogs, but they're still able to kind of get out and enjoy the nightlife. So that's something that's relatively easy if you just kind of do a YouTube search on frog hotels. A friend of mine has one on his front porch. It's just a big pot that he's got nice plants growing in, and he's got 3 or 4 of them. He's like, you have to try this. This is where it's at. So that's something that supplemental that might be beneficial. People may not be cool with snakes, but they might be a little bit more okay with having a frog nearby. All right, so then if we move on to songbirds, it's kind of what a lot of people might be a little bit more comfortable with, or might be kind of a starter place for them. Again, we're going to have to be thinking about food. We can do that really easily with supplemental food, but having a lot of native plants that are seed producing, berry producing, having water is great for a lot of birds. So thinking about drinking water, but here in a few months when it starts getting cold, we need to recognize that clean feathers are warm feathers. So allowing these birds a place to take a bird bath. It could be in a literal bird bath. Do you have a question?
Yeah, directly related to the bird baths and the winter. So a while ago, I bought some heaters for bird baths that turn off when it gets a certain degree and stay on. And it doesn't de-ice the whole thing. It keeps a nice big hole in it. How much water do you want to keep in a bird bath? I mean, I got bird baths that are 4, 5, 6 inches deep, like the Robinson, so they have something to eat.
Sure.
I mean,
So that's a great question. She's asking about bird baths, or the amount of water and kind of how to structurally put that together. Honestly, if there's a bigger water source, they might go to that first. So if you only have a de-iced, a small de-ice spot, you may not have very many birds coming in. But if it's the only water source in town, they're probably going to be really appreciative of it. As far as the depth of bird baths, I think shallower is better. And so kind of keeping that in mind, just like you said, a lot of the commercial bird baths might be a little bit too deep, where you can put rocks in the bottom of them.
bird baths have been handed down.
Oh, nice. So one thing that has been recommended, you can just dump over like a 5-gallon or a trash can lid, and so that's a very shallow bath for them there. All right, so moving on from our water habitat need, then we need a place for these birds to escape from maybe a sharp-shinned hawk that's looking for a meal, or a place to raise their young. So thinking about, you might be able to add some supplemental nest boxes for a handful of these birds that nest in Oklahoma that like those cavities, or if you've got more established trees in your neighborhood or in your yard, they might be able to kind of take advantage there. We have about 480 so species of birds that have been documented in the state total. That's not, they're not sticking around. Some of those might just be accidental or out of range, but there are several options for birds across the state. So now that we've kind of thought about the different habitat needs, let's talk about evaluating your property and kind of melding all of those habitat needs together. So there's a lot of things that you can do here. You can go old school and start out with just a blank piece of paper and kind of rough sketch in your area. Put, big circles for these are my mature trees. This is, more shrubs or more open spaces. And then really start thinking about what habitat you are offering right now, where are your opportunity areas, or if you just kind of want to start small, where can I start building off of relatively easy without going into your budget too much. You can also kind of use your cell phone and zoom in pretty close and get a literal bird's eye view of your property. I think what's most helpful there is whenever you zoom out, you are able to kind of look at the community as a whole. So maybe you're in a relatively new development, you don't have a lot of these mature trees that could be attracting your target species, but maybe your neighbor does, or maybe the local park does. And so you might just be getting some fringe benefit out of there. Again, if you don't have the habitat in your space, they may only visit, but that's still a pretty good thing to be considering. Seems like there's a little bit of a delay. And then we're going to plan for a long-term investment. Again, it's work to landscape. You guys know that. But what I'm hopeful here is to encourage you guys to give yourself some grace. If you move in or have been living in the same area for a long time, you've got a busy life. Like there's a lot of considerations for your budget. You've got a lot of time constraints. So give yourself